I never thought my life would turn into one of those stories you hear about, but never imagine happening to you. 25 years of marriage, a stable home, 2 incredible daughters. I had built everything on the foundation of trust. Or so I believed. My name is Andrew Baker, and for most of my life I thought I had it all figured out. But nothing prepares you for the moment you realize the person you trusted the most has already moved on, without telling you. It started with small things, missed conversations, quiet changes, but soon those small things turned into something I couldn't ignore. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. I just didn't want to see them. But now I had no choice. What would you do if the life you built suddenly turned into a lie? My name is Andrew Baker, but my friends call me AB. Not that I have many. I'm the kind of guy who doesn't waste time on meaningless conversations. Small talk? Not for me. I'm an engineer, trained to see things as they are. Problems, solutions, efficiency, feelings. Well, those tend to complicate things. I've spent my life building things that last, both at work and at home. Or so I thought. I've always believed in structure, in stability, and for 25 years, I thought my marriage was just that, solid, unshakable. Turns out, I was wrong. I work for a well-known national company, managing projects that require precision and foresight. Funny how I can predict structural failures in a blueprint, but never saw the cracks forming in my own life. I used to think that if I followed the rules, provided, stayed loyal, built a future, everything else would fall into place. But life doesn't work like an equation. It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes it blindsides you when you least expect it. Looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs. The quiet shifts in my wife's tone, the way she started staying out later, the subtle distance that grew between us. But I ignored them. I told myself it was normal. After all, 25 years together, we'd seen it all, survived it all. What could possibly go wrong now? We had our routines, our traditions, Sunday coffee on the porch, dinner at 7, a life built brick by brick. But routines can be deceptive. They can make you feel safe, even when the walls are caving in. Now, as I sit here telling this story, I wonder, was I too naive, too trusting, or just too busy to see what was happening right in front of me? The truth is, I thought I had everything under control, but control is an illusion. And soon I'd learned that the life I believed in was nothing more than a carefully constructed lie. For 25 years, my life followed a clear blueprint. I was married to Karen, the woman I once believed was my partner in everything. We built a life together in North Carolina, in a place surrounded by innovation and academia. It was the perfect setting for a structured life. Our 2 daughters, Claire and Denise, both excelling at prestigious universities, a home filled with memories, and a career that provided stability. From the outside, it looked like we had it all, and for a long time, I believed we did. My job demanded long hours, but I never hesitated to put my family first. Every milestone, every holiday, every late-night phone call from my daughters, I was there. I wasn't the most expressive father, but my love showed in my actions. I made sure they had everything they needed, that our home remained a place they could always return to. Karen and I had our differences, but we were a team, or so I thought. Looking back, I wonder if I was too focused on providing and not enough on paying attention. With the girls away at college, I imagined Karen and I would rediscover each other. We had spent decades raising our family, making sacrifices, prioritizing everything else. Now we had time to travel, time to reconnect, time to remember who we were before we became just mom and dad. It should have been a fresh start, a chance to enjoy the life we built. But life doesn't always unfold the way we expect, and love, it doesn't always age gracefully. Little did I know, while I was planning our future, Karen was already rewriting our story. The late-night reading sessions, the growing obsession with her new group of friends, the name Frank slipping into conversations. It all seemed harmless, at first. But nothing is ever just harmless, is it? I had this picture in my mind, a second honeymoon phase, just the two of us, making up for lost time. With the girls away, our home felt quieter, emptier. But instead of growing closer, Karen seemed different. At first I blamed it on the transition. After all, we had spent decades parenting. Maybe we just needed time to adjust, but it wasn't just that. There was a shift, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. She was more distracted, more distant, and suddenly our routines, the ones I thought grounded us, began to fade. Karen had always enjoyed reading, but now it consumed her. She wasn't just reading, she was writing, discussing, engaging in endless conversations with her new literary circle. I wanted to be supportive, but something felt off. It wasn't just a hobby, it was an escape. And then there was Frank. His name started appearing in stories, in anecdotes, in casual mentions that made my stomach tighten. He was just a friend, someone from her writing group. But I knew better. No man is ever just a friend when he starts occupying more of your wife's mind than you do. I remember the first time I really noticed the change. We were sitting at dinner, our usual spot, our usual time. But instead of looking at me, Karen's eyes were somewhere else. Her phone buzzed and she smiled, not at me, at whatever was on that screen. A chill ran through me, but I pushed it aside. I didn't want to be that husband, the paranoid, controlling type. So I told myself I was imagining things. That was my first mistake. The second mistake, ignoring the way she started pulling away, the late nights at her desk, the way she barely responded when I spoke, the sudden burst of independence. She didn't need me anymore. Or maybe she didn't want me anymore. And the worst part, I still had no idea just how deep this was about to go. The moment Karen mentioned the writing workshop in Illinois, something in my gut twisted. She brought it up casually, like it was just another event on her calendar. No discussion, no invitation. For my opinion, it's only a few days, she said, brushing it off like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Not to me. We'd always talked about decisions like this, big or small, and now she was simply informing me, as if my input no longer mattered. That was the first real crack I couldn't ignore. I tried to play it cool, but my mind wouldn't stop. This wasn't just a harmless trip. I had overheard enough of her writing group's conversations to know the kinds of topics they discussed. Passionate stories, forbidden affairs, the liberation of self-discovery. And Frank? His name came up too often, always wrapped in admiration, in curiosity. It wasn't jealousy. I wasn't the type. But something about the way she spoke of him, the way she defended his ideas, left a bad taste in my mouth. The night before she left, I caught her packing. There was something almost eager about the way she folded her clothes, checked her phone, hummed softly to herself. She looked happy, happier than I had seen her in a long time. And the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. That happiness wasn't because of me. I wanted to ask her outright, to demand answers, but I didn't. Instead, I just stood there, watching my wife prepare for something that felt like the beginning of the end. When she finally left for the airport, I told myself I was being paranoid. I'd convinced myself it was just a workshop, just a few days, just my own insecurity messing with me. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't just about writing. And Karen? She wasn't just going to Illinois for inspiration. The day Karen returned from Illinois, I knew. Before she even spoke, before she unpacked her suitcase, before she kissed me hello, it was all over her face. There was a lightness in her step, a softness in her voice, a glow that had nothing to do with me. I watched her move around the house, like a stranger, like someone who had outgrown the life we built. And that's when it hit me. Whatever happened on that trip, it had changed something between us. I tried to ignore it, but silence has a way of filling the spaces between two people. That night, as we sat across from each other at dinner, I finally asked, "How was the workshop?" The way she hesitated before answering told me more than her words ever could. It was inspiring. That was it. No details, no funny anecdotes, no mentions of the people she had spent days with, no mention of Frank. And that silence screamed louder than anything else. I pushed. I brought up the conversations I had overheard, the way Frank's name had come up too many times. I asked why she hadn't told me more about the trip, why she seemed different. She sighed, exhausted, impatient. "Andrew, not everything is about you." That sentence cut deeper than I expected. I wasn't asking for it to be about me. I was asking to matter. But Karen had already checked out of the conversation, just like she had checked out of our marriage. The night ended in silence. Both of us lying in bed, staring at opposite walls. I could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing down on us, the distance growing wider with every breath. I wanted to believe this was just a rough patch, that time would fix it. But deep down, I already knew. I wasn't losing her. I had already lost her. Doubt is a funny thing. It starts as a whisper, a nagging thought you push aside, but once it settles in, it grows, slowly at first, then all at once. I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking, that Karen was just going through a phase, but in my gut, I knew better. And when I found myself checking her phone when she left the room, scrolling through her social media for any sign of him, I realized I needed answers, real ones, not the half-truths she was feeding me. So I did what any man in my position would do. I hired a private investigator, a professional, someone who could separate fact from paranoia. It felt ridiculous at first, like something out of a bad movie. But the moment I made the call, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. I wasn't just sitting back, waiting to be blindsided. I was taking action, and deep down, I already knew what he would find. The investigator wasted no time. He followed her from the moment she landed in Illinois, documenting every step. The late-night meetings, the laughter shared over wine, the stolen moments that weren't meant to be seen, and then the proof, the kind of images that turn your stomach, that make your hands shake when you hold them. Karen and Frank together, completely unbothered by the world around them. No hesitation, no guilt, as if I had never existed. When I saw the pictures, I didn't feel rage, I didn't feel heartbreak, I felt clarity, the kind that settles in your bones, the kind that tells you there's no going back. My marriage wasn't dying, it was already dead. And now I had the proof to bury it. I sat with the evidence in my hands for hours, staring at it, memorizing every detail. Not because I needed more proof, I had more than enough, but because I wanted to burn the last bit of denial inside me. This was real. This was happening. And now it was time to act. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting match. Karen had already made her choice. Now I had to make mine, and I wasn't about to be the man who begged to be chosen. I started planning my exit in silence. Every night after Karen fell asleep, I made arrangements. I contacted my company, secured a transfer to Portland, Maine, far from the life I had built, far from the betrayal. I found a new place, something small, something just for me. And I spoke with a lawyer, making sure that when I walked away, I wouldn't be looking back. The hardest part was pretending, waking up next to her, drinking coffee in the same kitchen, playing the role of a husband when I already knew I wasn't one anymore. But I didn't let it show. If Karen had been able to lie to me for months, I could manage a few weeks. I wanted control over the timing, over how this ended. She had taken enough from me. I wouldn't let her take my dignity too. As the days passed, the house slowly stopped feeling like mine. The framed photos, the shared memories, the years spent under this roof, they all started fading into something distant, something that no longer belonged to me. And when the moment came, when every piece of my plan was set, I felt nothing but certainty. This chapter was over, and I was the one turning the page. Breaking the news to my daughters was the hardest part. Claire and Denise had always seen our family as unshakable, solid, dependable, a foundation they could always return to. Telling them the truth felt like tearing that foundation apart. But I refused to lie. They deserved honesty, no matter how much it hurt. So one evening I sat them down, took a deep breath and told them everything. No sugarcoating, no filtering, just the truth. Claire was the first to react, anger flashing across her face, her hands clenched into fists. She did what? Her voice cracked, and I saw the betrayal hit her like a wave. Denise, always the more composed one, stayed quiet at first, processing, but I could see it in her eyes. The same pain, the same disbelief. They had looked up to their mother, trusted her, and now that trust was shattered. What surprised me most was their immediate support. I had expected questions, maybe even resentment, but instead Claire reached for my hand, her grip tight. "We're with you, Dad." Denise nodded, her voice steady. She made her choice. Now we make ours. There was no hesitation, no trying to justify their mother's actions. Just raw, honest disappointment. And in that moment I realized I hadn't lost my family. If anything, Karen had lost hers. As the days passed, I watched them navigate their emotions, Claire's fiery frustration, Denise's quiet detachment. But through it all, one thing remained clear. They stood by me. The betrayal had divided our family, but in a strange way, it had also made our bond unbreakable. Karen may have rewritten our story, but my daughters and I, we were already writing a new one. The day Karen returned home, she didn't expect anything to be different. She walked up the driveway like she always did, reached into her purse, and slid her key into the lock, only to find it wouldn't turn. Confusion flickered across her face as she tried again and again. Then reality hit. She wasn't locked out by mistake. She was locked out on purpose. And that's when the panic set in. Her phone calls came in rapid succession, first to me, then to the girls, all ignored. I wanted her to feel it, the helplessness, the isolation, the sense that the world she had built for herself was crumbling. She had taken our marriage for granted, assumed I would always be there, waiting, forgiving. But I wasn't that man anymore. She had gambled everything, and now she was left with nothing. Eventually, she found me. I was at a hotel, finalizing my move. When she arrived, she looked desperate, exhausted. "Andrew, we need to talk." I let her speak, let her try to explain, to justify, to shift the blame. "You were always so distant," she said. "You never noticed me anymore." I almost laughed. Noticed her? I had spent years devoted to our life together, to our family. And in return, she had chosen to rewrite her story with someone else. By the time she finished, there was nothing left to say. I stood up, grabbed my keys and looked her in the eye. "You made your choice, now live with it." And with that, I walked away. No yelling, no dramatic farewell, just silence. The same silence she had given me for months, only this time, she was the one left alone in it. Starting over at my age wasn't something I had ever planned. But as I stood in my new home in Portland, Maine, surrounded by boxes and unfamiliarity, I felt something unexpected: relief. No more doubts, no more sleepless nights, wondering what Karen was doing, who she was with. The pain was still there, sure, but it wasn't consuming me anymore. It was just fading, and in its place, something else was growing. A sense of possibility. Claire and Denise kept in touch constantly, checking in, making sure I wasn't drowning in regret. But regret wasn't part of my vocabulary anymore. They visited when they could, and each time I saw it more clearly. Karen hadn't just lost me. She had lost them too. They still spoke to her, but it wasn't the same. The trust was broken, and she knew it. Some mistakes come with a price you can't ever repay. As for Karen and Frank, well, let's just say their grand love story didn't turn out the way she imagined. Writing wasn't as easy as she thought, and neither was building a life on betrayal. Whatever spark they had fizzled out, leaving her with nothing but a manuscript no one wanted to publish and a relationship that didn't survive reality. I should have felt vindicated, but honestly, I just felt done. She was part of my past, and that's exactly where she belonged. Life moves on. And so did I. The world was different now, but it wasn't worse. It was mine. I had spent years building a life around someone who didn't value it. Now, I was finally building something for myself, and for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a weight on my shoulders. It felt like a door, wide open, and I was ready to walk through it.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.